Lindsey Graham's up for re-election. In 2026, he has a primary challenger who's running more from a populist, America First perspective. And Trump has endorsed Lindsey Graham, and he's not only endorsing Lindsey Graham vocally, he's doing so vocally, and he's actually fundraising for him. And the same is true for all of these neocons in the Republican Party, all of these warmongers, all of these corporatists, people who don't care at all about the working class, who want to just serve their big donors, their big corporate base, who want constant wars. There's dozens of them. Trump's not campaigning against any of them. He doesn't denounce any of them. He is, though, denouncing two different Republicans. One, he's on a complete jihad against, which is Thomas Massie. He's vowing to remove Thomas Massie from the Congress. And he has three extremely pro-Israel billionaires, including Mary Madelson, who are basically single-handedly funding the anti-Massie PAC to remove Massie from Congress. They are motivated by the fact that Thomas Massie is probably, certainly in the Republican Party, maybe next to now with Marjorie Taylor Greene, but for a long time was the only vocal voice against the influence of Israel in American politics, how much we do for Israel, how much money we give to Israel. And AIPAC, before Trump did, announced they wanted Thomas Massie gone. And by a huge coincidence, Donald Trump decided of all the Republicans in Congress and the Senate that he wanted to remove, the one he wants to most remove is the person that just so happens to be AIPAC's primary target as well. And I'm not saying that's the only reason Trump wants Tom Massie gone, but it's certainly one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons why he's able to get so much money poured into PACs to remove Thomas Massie from Congress. Thomas Massie is supposed to be what, in a lot of ways, MAGA was supposed to be. Anti-war, anti-interventionist, very anti-censorship, pro-free speech. And we'll get to Thomas Massie in a second, but now Trump is also starting to intensify his targeting of Ron Paul's son, Rand Paul, who I would say, certainly among Republican senators, is the most anti-war, the most anti-interventionist, the most pro-free speech, has denounced a lot of Trump's censorship, the way he did with Biden and Obama. And I think it speaks volumes about the two Republican members of Congress that Trump is targeting for destruction and removal versus the people that Trump is defending and fundraising for and doing everything to keep in power, people like Lindsey Graham. So this tension has been brewing for a while. There was a Rose Garden lunch back in, this was just a few days, was this just a few days ago? I thought this had happened a little earlier. Actually, it was today. There was something else where there was an event at the White House. I believe it was the Easter egg roll or something, where Rand Paul made it a point to say that he had gone every year because he was invited every year. And this year he didn't get invited by the Trump White House. And then earlier today, from Politico, Rand Paul says he was not invited to the Rose Garden lunch, where he didn't show up. And Rand Paul then clarified himself on X, saying, I actually wasn't invited to the White House lunch today, but that's okay. I had previously scheduled a Liberty Caucus lunch with Thomas Massie. So he's very pointedly supporting Thomas Massie in that tweet, aligning himself with Massie, because he knows that Trump is coming for him. This was at the White House earlier today. Trump actually spoke at the Rose Garden with a bunch of GOP senators, and that was why it was notable that Rand Paul was not invited. That's why he wasn't there. And Trump made a little poking aside at Rand Paul. This is what he said.
Listen here, everybody showed up. I figured you'd have I'd say 40 would have been a good number, right? If everybody, we're just missing one person. You'll never guess who that is. Let me give you, he automatically votes no on everything. He thinks it's good politics. It's really not good politics. He's an automatic no.
So that was the issue, is Trump made it a point to say every single Republican senator got their marching orders, went down to the White House as ordered, like they do pretty much about everything. And the only one who wasn't there was Rand Paul of the entire Republican caucus, but then Rand Paul said, I wasn't even invited. That's why I didn't go. Now, all of this was preceded a few days ago by a very vocal, public, direct attack by President Trump on Rand Paul. He went to Truth Social and he posted this, quote, whatever happened to Senator Rand Paul? I'm endlessly mystified by Trump's use of scare quotes. Even if you're trying to criticize Rand Paul, he actually is a senator. I don't know what those scare quotes are for, but that's just an aside. He was never great, but he went really bad. He broke bad. I got him elected twice in the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. Such an odd claim because Rand Paul was elected to the Senate in Kentucky before Trump ever appeared on the scene. I'm not sure how Trump thinks he got Rand Paul elected twice. But anyway, I got him elected twice, but he just never votes positively for the Republican Party. He's a nasty little guy. Much like, scare quotes, Congressman Thomas Massie, a.k.a. Rand Paul Jr., also of Kentucky, which I won 3 times in massive landslides, is what he says about Massie. He's a sick wacko who refuses to vote for our great Republican Party, MAGA, or America First. It's really weird. Tom Massie has been saying things like, why are we giving so much foreign aid to these other countries like Ukraine and Israel instead of keeping it in our own communities to take care of the American people, which I thought, and I paid pretty close attention to the Trump movement from the beginning. I thought that was a pretty pure representation of America First. I've heard people on America First say that, including Donald Trump, over and over and over. And this, by the way, has become Marjorie Taylor Greene's critique of the Trump movement. And it's only a matter of time before he targets her, even though she had been one of his most loyal advocates, which is she keeps saying, wait a minute, why are we bombing the Houthis? People in my district don't even know what Houthis are, let alone consider them a threat to their lives. Why are we spending all this money and just killing people to bomb the Houthis? And then she said the same thing about why we're bombing Iran. And she's very much questioned the billions and billions and billions and massive amounts of attention and soft power and diplomatic force that goes to protecting Israel. And she's doing so on America First grounds, what she got inspired by to enter politics. And that's the same for Thomas Massie and for Rand Paul. And those are the people that Trump is deciding to target. Not the people who, remember, he ran against Rand Paul in 2016. He also ran against Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and was vicious toward them. And those were the candidates of the Republican establishment. First, Jeb Bush, and then when he proved to be a complete flop, they turned to Marco Rubio, and then when he dropped out to Ted Cruz. The Republican Party establishment never rallied behind Rand Paul, just like they hated his father, Ron Paul. Because they're outside the Republican establishment, it's just very interesting and I think revealing in a lot of ways that Trump is so single-mindedly devoted to destroying them. Now, it is true that both Rand Paul and Thomas Massie are the kinds of members of Congress who believe in principle that they're not going to just vote the way the White House tells them. And I've seen Trump supporters, including probably some who watch the show, saying, well, why do Rand Paul and Thomas Massie refuse to vote with Trump? We elected Trump. Yes, you elected Trump. You also elected every member of the Senate and Congress, including Rand Paul and Thomas Massie, and both of them have won repeatedly in Kentucky based on standing on these principles, regardless of whether the Republican or the Democratic Party supports them. Donald Trump ran on the same grounds in 2016. So in June, when Trump wanted this so-called big, beautiful bill passed, Rand Paul did what his father had done forever, what Rand Paul has always done, which is say there's way too much spending in here. A big Rand Paul policy. And it's bizarre that this has placed him on the outs in the Republican Party, of the conservative movement, is that we're too far into debt. We have massive deficit spending. We spend on everything. And Rand Paul thought that the big, beautiful bill, which it does, massively increases the debt and the deficit. And so he said, I'm going to vote no. Here from the Hill, June 3rd, 2025, Trump slams Senator Paul for voting no on everything, lacking constructive ideas. Now, last night we showed you that Rand Paul went on Meet the Press this weekend and objected to Trump's policy of blowing boats up in Venezuela and then claiming afterward they were filled with narco-terrorists, because Rand Paul also objected to the Obama war on terror policy, where they would just go blow people up by drone and afterwards say, oh, don't worry, those were all militants, even though we have no idea who the people we just blew up were. Same with these boats. We have no idea who these people on these boats are. And they're like, no, don't worry, these are narco-terrorists, very dangerous people coming to the United States, even though they're thousands of miles away. And J.D. Vance, who loves X, J.D. Vance is very smart. He is very smart. But sometimes, he's the vice president of the United States, but he does seem to really enjoy trolling on Twitter. He opened a Blue Sky account to troll the liberals there. It just seems a little bit beneath the office. I get that Trump succeeded, but Trump is a very singular politician. In any event, a Democratic partisan named Brian Krasenstein went on to X. I'm only noting Brian Krasenstein's post because J.D. Vance replied to it. And Brian Krasenstein said in early September about the initial strike on a Venezuelan boat, quote, killing the citizens of another country who are civilians without any due process is called a war crime. I think he said that in response to J.D. Vance posting the video. And in response, J.D. Vance replied, I don't give a shit what you call it. Now, all right, that was J.D. Vance's reply. Again, I think he sees what worked for Trump. He's trying to replicate that. This is not ever how J.D. Vance comported himself, but he does now. He wants to be the heir to the MAGA movement. I understand that. But Rand Paul responded to J.D. Vance. That obviously offends Rand Paul. Rand Paul has been defending the right to due process, the need to comply with basic norms when we go around the world killing people. The fact that we should produce evidence for it before we just blow people up. And he said, quote, JD, quote, I don't give a shit Vance says killing people he accuses of a crime is, quote, the highest and best use of the military. Did he ever read To Kill a Mockingbird? Did he ever wonder what might happen if the accused were immediately executed without trial or representation? What a despicable and thoughtless sentiment it is to glorify killing someone without a trial. And the U.S. Coast Guard and other parts of the U.S. military that project force do interdict boats that they suspect carrying drugs, and they enter the boat and they try and see whether or not there's drugs on there. And if there are drugs on there, they arrest the people and bring them to a prison and put them on trial and have the evidence, the testimony of what they found on the boat, who was on the boat, and those people get convicted and go to prison. Why did we suddenly change that and just start blowing boats up randomly without having any idea who's on them? Also, Rand Paul has made clear that he opposes tariffs. And we covered tariffs and the fact that it was a view of the left for a long time that tariffs are needed to undermine the excesses of free trade. But for conservatives, especially more libertarian economic conservatives like Rand Paul, tariffs and protectionism are horrible. They believe in the ability of countries to just trade freely. And so he's been a vocal opponent of Trump's tariff policy. And he joined with various Democrats like Ron Wyden and Chuck Schumer and Tim Kaine to introduce bipartisan legislation to repeal the tariffs and restore congressional authority over trade, which really had as its main goal the idea that the president can't just set tariff policies. That's something that has to be done by Congress. It's a balance of power argument that, again, Rand Paul was constantly pushing as a way to limit the power of people like Barack Obama and Joe Biden when they were president as well. His crime is that he's now extending that consistent critique in the same way to Donald Trump. Thomas Massie has been a target of Trump for even longer than Rand Paul has. The first time he ever attacked him, at least in this presidency, was back in March. So barely, not even 2 months after Trump got inaugurated, he went on to Truth Social and he said this, using those scare quotes again, Congressman, as though he's not really a congressman, he's something else. Congressman Thomas Massie voted to delay the debt ceiling bill from the Biden administration to the Trump administration without getting anything for this horrendously stupid move. When Republicans could have gotten everything they wanted, he additionally voted to delay the current budget disaster from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. I was running for office at the time, doing my thing, and when I heard about this, it was quite simply hard to believe, a catastrophic mistake. Now, on virtually on every other issue, he's a very simple no. He can't even approve a continuing resolution when he approved that many times during his career as a congressman. Tom Massie is a grandstander in all caps. And the great people of Kentucky are going to be watching a very interesting primary in the not too distant future, clearly threatening Thomas Massie with a primary challenge. And again, continuing resolutions are the ones that just say, you know what, just keep the government going until we figure things out, just keep spending where it is. This is something Republicans hated when Democrats controlled the Congress. They thought continuing resolutions were awful because they just kept government spending at the level they were at. So of course, someone like Tom Massie, who's a hawk on deficit spending and the debt, and Rand Paul are going to oppose anything that keeps Washington spending at its current trajectory. The idea that that gets you kicked out of the conservative movement is bizarre. But what Thomas Massie really does is oppose Trump's foreign policy, especially when it comes to Israel, something that has become very sacred to Donald Trump. In June, Thomas Massie went on Tucker Carlson's program. He's been on our program many times as well, talking about these similar things. And he said something that was quite remarkable for a member of Congress to report and admit regarding Israel, and it had a lot of repercussions. And here's what he said.
Everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What's that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
Every member has something like this?
that's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to D.C., you go have lunch with them. And they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them.
That's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, I'll talk to my AIPAC person. And it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to dial those ads back.
Why have I never heard this before?
Why would they want to tell their constituents that they've basically got a buddy system with somebody who's representing a foreign country? It doesn't benefit the congressman for people to know that, so they're not going to tell you that.
So I guess you can argue, oh no, it's just a massive coincidence that the Republican Donald Trump and his extremely fanatically pro-Israel billionaire donors have decided to target for destruction and remove from Congress just so happens to be the person who has been saying things like this about Israel for quite a while now. Just a few days before Donald Trump bombed Iran with Israel and for Israel, Massie went on to X, this was June 16th, and said this, quote, "This is not our war. But even if it were, Congress must decide such matters. According to our Constitution, I'm introducing a bipartisan war powers resolution tomorrow to prohibit our involvement. I invite all members of Congress to co-sponsor this resolution." I mean, the idea that we shouldn't go bomb Iran for Israel seems like pretty America first to me, as I've always understood it. And as I've heard Donald Trump defend it. And for the crime of insisting on adherence to what were supposed to be the principles of this movement, he's now being targeted by Trump basically for supporting America first. And instead, Trump is siding with people like Lindsey Graham, who are, at least as I've always understood it and heard it, the very antithesis of America first. I think it says a lot about the Trump administration, who they regard as their enemies. A few days after bombing Iran, ignoring what Massie said, Trump went to True Social and again escalated his attack on Massie. He said, quote, "Congressman Thomas Massie," no scare quotes this time, "Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky is not MAGA, even though he likes to say he is. Actually, MAGA doesn't even want him, doesn't know him, and doesn't respect him. He is a negative force who almost always votes no. No matter how good something may be, he's a simple-minded grandstander who thinks it's good politics for Iran to have the highest level nuclear weapon while at the same time yelling death to America at every chance they get. Iran has killed and maimed thousands of Americans and even took over the American embassy in Tehran under the Carter administration. We had a spectacular military success yesterday, taking the bomb right out of their hands, and they would use it if they could. But as usual, and despite all the praise and accolades received, this lightweight congressman is against what was so brilliantly achieved last night in Iran. Massie is weak and effective and votes no on virtually everything put before him. He's Rand Paul Jr. No matter how good something may be, MAGA should drop this pathetic loser, Tom Massie, like the plague. The good news is that we have a wonderful American patriot running against him in the Republican Party, and I'll be out in Kentucky campaigning really hard. MAGA is not about lazy, grandstanding, non-productive politicians, of which Thomas Massie is definitely one. Okay, that was for opposing the bombing of Iran for Israel. In the response, Trump wrote about how Iran took hostages, chant death to America, was getting the bomb, would be used the bomb. These are all talking points right out of the Netanyahu government. And the other thing I just want to say quickly is it was really bizarre for me to watch this. I noticed this, that Thomas Massie used to be pretty popular among conservatives. I said that the other day, and a bunch of the blindest Trump supporters who just changed their views like people change their underwear one day to the next based on what they need to believe to support Trump and cheer Trump and defend Trump, were saying, oh, that's so stupid. Thomas Massie supported Ron DeSantis. It's true, he did support Ron DeSantis. I don't think he likes Trump personally. But the thing is, so many of the people with the greatest power in MAGA also supported Ron DeSantis and not Donald Trump. So it's hardly an excuse. I say Thomas Massie is popular among America First because he, on foreign policy, is one of the most vocal America First advocates. It's just that he's fallen out of favor with Trump and his followers, his blindest followers, because Trump deviated from that America First policy while Thomas Massie stayed there. June 26th, this was right around the time Trump announced that. The Daily Caller says, exclusive, AIPAC is seeking out challengers to unseat Representative Thomas Massie. So as usual, AIPAC and Trump completely aligned. Politico, 5 days later, reported on the creation and funding of a new anti-Massie PAC. And here are the people funding it. GOP mega donor Paul Singer. And Paul Singer hated Trump. Paul Singer is the financier of the Washington Beacon. The Washington Beacon is a very neoconservative outlet. They were the first to basically hire Christopher Steele for the Steele dossier. They wanted to destroy Trump. Paul Singer hates Trump, hated Trump. And yet Paul Singer is funding the anti-Massie PAC, not because he's angry that he voted against a big, beautiful bill, but because he's critical of Israel. This is the real power behind it. GOP mega donor Paul Singer was the latest donor to a super PAC seeking to oust Representative Thomas Massie. Last month, according to a filing submitted to the FEC on Thursday, the group, MAGA Kentucky, raised $2 million between its launch in late June and the end of the month. $1 million from Singer, $250,000 from hedge fund manager John Paulson, who's also a hardcore pro-Israel billionaire, $750,000 from Preserve America PAC, a super PAC tied to Miriam Adelson. Can you believe that Miriam Adelson, who Donald Trump just said, he asked her, do you love Israel more or America more, and she wouldn't answer, has the audacity to name her PAC Preserve America as if that's actually her agenda? Anyone confused about why Miriam Adelson wants to remove Tom Massie from Congress, given that she's a one-issue person and that issue is Israel? That's what is going on here. All right, let me ask you something. How much time do you spend every day on a web browser? You can be honest. It's okay. You don't have to be embarrassed. Like clicking around, searching, scrolling through endless tabs. It's a lot, right? A lot of time. Well, there's a new AI-powered browser called Perplexity. From Perplexity, that's called Comet, and it completely changes how you interact with the web. Using Comet feels like having a personal assistant living right inside your browser, one that can actually do things for you, not just give you answers, but literally click, type, scroll, and search, just like you would, getting tasks done in the background while you focus on other things. I've been trying it out. Here's one of the first things I did. I had Comet find a restaurant that fit my schedule, book the reservation for me, and even send a calendar invite. All while I kept doing other things, including working on the show. All I had to do was mention a few things that I was craving in terms of food, how far I wanted to drive. It figured out the rest in the background. It can also shop for you, summarize articles, book travel, or even bulk unsubscribe you from spam. All you have to do is download Perplexity's new AI web browser, Comet, today by heading to pplx.ai/Glenn. And when you download it, you'll get a free month of Rumble Premium. That's pplx.ai/Glenn. Take back your time online with Comet. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.